Greetings, humans. Welcome to Friday Night Live with Bob and Emil. Bob Harris, Emil Kadlec. You are the listeners and viewers and readers of the footballdiehards.com website, I hope. If you're not reading it right now, you probably should be. If you're not a subscriber, no worries. Go to footballdiehards.com/free trial and get 2 weeks to see what the hell we're up to. You might like what you see, and you might stick around beyond that, is what we're thinking. Touch base on a little news as we're getting ready to take questions, and we will take your questions. We like your questions, and we'll see if you like our answers. But remember, the Giants, Packers, Seahawks, and Titans are all on bye this week. If you have any of those players in your lineups, I would remove them now. If you have Myles Garrett in your, well, no, we'll get into that. We're not going to get into Myles Garrett. What a crazy Thursday night game that was. The Lions, Matt Stafford's going to miss another game. Jeff Driscoll will get the start at quarterback against the Dallas Cowboys. Pretty tough matchup for those wide receivers anyway. Ty Johnson's questionable in that game. We'll see if he can make it. He did practice fully on Friday, so that's a good sign. 49ers got a mess again. George Kittle's doubtful. Matt Breida is doubtful. Robbie Gould is questionable.
Yeah.
Dante Pettis questionable. Also in the doghouse. Kyle Shanahan not happy with him. Looks like we may funnel that down. It's a great matchup against the Cardinals. We'll see what comes of that. The Philadelphia Eagles have troubles with the injuries going against the Patriots. We'll have are you there, Emil?
Can you hear me?
I hear you, but I see you're frozen in the video.
Yeah,
so
well, we'll figure out that. But I guess audio is better than seeing my ugly face move around. So we'll go with that.
Yes.
I have no idea what happened.
We get hungry on that, right?
Yes,
now,
of course.
How can we fix mine so you can't see me? Remember the Eagles. We'll get to the Eagles. We have issues at running back. Well, it looks like Jordan Howard won't be ready to go. He's listed as questionable, but as of this morning, Friday morning, he had not been cleared for contact. So that's a little bit of a problem there. And beyond that, Darren Sproles done for the season. So they signed Jay Ajayi heading into this game. Ajayi thinks he could be ready to contribute right away, and he probably could. He knows the offense. But it would be Miles Sanders you'd think they would get a huge bump. Also, Alshon Jeffrey's out, so they're going to have issues at wide receiver as well. I don't think Nelson Aguilar or the newly signed, re-signed, rejoined team. It's like old home week in Philadelphia. Jordan Matthews also back. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside has been struggling. Mac Hollins not doing much. Maybe the tight ends. You would think in this game, Emil, that Bill Belichick, given a couple weeks to sit around and stew on a loss, has come up with a way to slow the strength of the Eagles, which seems to be the tight end. So we'll see if those receivers can get anything done. The Falcons will be without both Devonta Freeman and maybe more importantly, Austin Hooper, who's been getting a ton of targets, especially in the red zone. It's a great matchup going against the Carolina Panthers, especially for one Brian Hill. Go read my DFS 3 and out column. I have a couple of players in there that you might be interested in. The Vikings, once again, without Adam Thielen. That'll be interesting. And the Jaguars get Nick Foles back this week. So we'll dig into these stories and more as we get time. We'll see what happens with questions here as we crank up the Periscope. Are we cranking up the Periscope on the Twitter?
Oh, yeah. Certainly on Periscope we're up. I haven't looked over at Twitter.
Twitter yet, so that may be a little bit of an issue there. But anyhow, we'll get questions on the Periscope. If you're tuned in, give us a holler. We're right here. Would love to hear what you what's interesting to you. Emil, as you look at that game with Stafford out, going against the Lions, going up, it's a tough matchup. Cowboys coming to town. What do you think about Kenny Golladay? How do we rank Kenny Golladay and Marvin Jones, knowing there's no Matthew Stafford in this matchup?
Well, yeah, it's, when do you go to somebody else after a while, because he's been having such a tough time. He had 9 targets last week and scored a touchdown, but only caught 3.
Right.
He only caught 3 plays. Man, that's a tough situation. You're almost hoping you've got some other players you can play, even though there's 4 teams on bye this week.
Yeah, I think, though, for Golladay, just given his role and, his abilities, you kind of probably keep him where you kept him, and maybe you make some adjustments at other spots of your roster. Maybe you need to be a little riskier in your flex or a little safer in your flex, however your approach manages. I think Marvin Jones, you're kind of looking at as a wide receiver 2 most. Maybe you're broadening the window and viewing him as a wide receiver 3 level player, and, you're looking at your options like that. Jeff Driscoll's very athletic. Maybe a full week of practice will help him. I don't think the Cowboys match will. I'm also, the Cowboys offense. This just in, pretty powerful. Probably do some damage. We've seen the workload for Ezekiel Elliott has been huge. Interestingly, Jerry Jones wanted Dak Prescott to shoulder more of the load going forward, or mentioned that, and so I think that's kind of interesting to note there. So I guess for me, I'm not dialing back too much on Galladay, maybe a little bit on Jones.
Now, what about Elliott? He hasn't been getting. Last year he had, I forget how many, 60 or so receptions, and he's just not really part of the passing game compared to what he was last year. How much is that hurting his value?
Last year, and that's been the problem. He's getting some. It's just not as much as last year. But the workload on the ground has been everything we want. And another, Sunday night football, I should have mentioned this at the top. David Montgomery is questionable. He returned to practice Friday on a limited basis, but he twisted his ankle, lightly rolled was what Matt Nagy said in Wednesday's practice, and he did not practice Thursday. So that's a little concerning. Since it's the Sunday night kickoff. You'd like to get him on the field there, but maybe it's going to be a little tough. Maybe you have to think about your options or have a fallback plan in place. If nothing else, I think the passing game matchup is not that great. Allen Robinson, who's been kind of a target monster, probably going up against Jalen Ramsey. How do you feel about the other side of that matchup, Emil? We saw the Rams haven't been quite themselves, right? And I think a lot of it has to do with Todd Gurley not quite having the role he's had. How do we feel about the Rams offense right now? Cooper Kupp coming off a horrible week. You expect a correction there. Both tight ends listed as questionable. What would your expectations be for Todd Gurley this week? How do you view him?
Yeah, well, first off, I think that the fact that they're home really helps them. They seem to play better at home, especially Goff and the kid.
Definitely Goff.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know, Gurley, 73 yards last week. That's not bad. Only 12 carries again. Right. So, and he had just targeted 4 times and didn't catch one. He's really, it just doesn't look like it's happening now. Of course, they're at home. I think they're going to try to, use him as much as they can. It's just incredible how different each week this team can play. But I like the fact they're at home. And I think that's going to, give him I'd be positive about what he's going to do, but it's still, you're only getting 12 carries, even though he made a lot out of them. And you're not catching the ball like you used to. So he's really not doing what we want him to do, but I think this week, I think they'll probably play a lot better than last week. So even though they're playing the Bears, they're at home. So that helps.
Yeah, I think there's a course correction coming for Cooper Kupp. He's not going to get that 220-yard game again that we saw against the Bengals. But I think expecting him to be held to the state, it was like 0 catches against Pittsburgh. Very tough defense, the Steelers. I think he had at least 2 catches in every one of his other 31 games. So out of 32 games, he's had only one where he's been shut out. He's had 100 receiving yards in 5 games this season, 5 touchdowns in those games. So. And he's been, kind of disappears, but I think that's more Goff related. And I think you're right. It's more of an issue of, I think the playing at home seems to be a heck of a lot better for Goff. But by the way, both tight ends are listed and questionable in this game. They're expected to play. And as for Gurley, for me, he's still a running back too. He's just he's touchdown dependent now. You need him to score to really get the kind of return you're looking for.
And you're not getting the PPR.
No, the
you're not getting. Last year, if you recall, he couldn't do anything wrong. Even if he would get 50 yards rushing, he would end up with 8 for 80 yards and a touchdown, and he's still scoring 15 to 20 fantasy points on a bad day. And that's not happening, and I don't think it's going to change in general. There is some matchup dependency, and hopefully this week, even though against Chicago, he's at home. But yeah, he's
the difference between like Gurley and like, let's say, Ezekiel Elliott, who's maybe falling a little short as a receiver, is now, at least over the last month, he's up over 25 carries a game, or at least 25 touches a game, because his carries are keeping you afloat, and he does a hell of a lot with them. I think against Detroit this week. By the way, that's a sweet play. They're giving up a hell of a lot of points. And look, if you read my DFS 3 and out, I think the same of Brian Hill for the same reason. The matchup is phenomenal. The Panthers have been very generous to opposing running backs. I'm kind of looking forward to that game to see what happens without Hooper, and maybe that's more worrisome than not having Freeman. Although Freeman's played well the last few weeks. Did we get any questions in?
No, not any questions right now, which probably means something went wrong since you can't see my face. Although I'm looking at Periscope right now, we're live, so I don't know what's going on. But I don't see any questions here.
What'd you say? The Periscope. I'm going to open up the Periscope. See if I can get any questions.
But that Hill guy, that Brian Hill, yeah, that guy, you never know this week. He could end up being a pretty productive player.
Yeah, I love him this week. He is on my DFS 3 and out. Kyle Dvorak, our colleague at Football Diehards, loves his free squares. He's viewing him as a free square this week, and I don't disagree with him. I think he's a great play. I also think Russell Gage is a great play in that game with Hooper out. The next guy getting red zone targets has been Gage. It's been Hooper and Gage. Hooper's getting almost 19% of the red zone targets, which I think is a big deal. And so you got that going for him. I think that's a pretty good deal. Bringing us up on the
I think those are interesting plays. Calvin Ridley got 5 targets for 3 last week against the Saints, but Julio Jones got 9, but he only caught 3 balls, 79 yards. Not again, all that not really what you're wanting. Of course, they were playing it at the Saints, so I think you got to let that go a little bit.
Yeah,
and to see Brian Hill got 2 targets, 1 catch, and a touchdown against New Orleans. If he could just get a few more carries and a few more targets, that guy could really have a big week.
All right, so San Francisco against Arizona. We've got some chatter today. Chase Edmonds, of course, is out. And during practice in the final walkthrough, Josh Weinfuss of ESPN saw that it seemed to be Kenyon Drake working with the first team. He pressed Cliff Kingsbury on that after practice. David Johnson was getting his turns, but Kingsbury said after practice that there really isn't a starter. It's going to depend on the package. I can kind of see what he means by that. I think if they're in a passing set, maybe that is. But Kenyon Drake had a lot of success against the 49ers, who are a team you can run against. Do you expect that kind of game again for the Cardinals this week? Maybe more of a Drake than a David Johnson. And can you even trust David Johnson anymore, Emil?
I don't think you can right now. I think it's a real problem. Just glancing at the box score against Tampa Bay, David Johnson 5 carries, 2 yards. Drake had 10 for 35, which isn't bad. And then you go to the receiving, where David Johnson, you would think, okay, he's going to make it up there. 1 target, 1 catch, 8 yards. Kenyon Drake 7 targets, 6 catches. He only got 6 yards, so obviously he was just around but he's getting the PPR. So if you got to start one of them, you're starting Drake right now. And can you start, like you said, I don't think right now you can start David Johnson. I just don't think you can do it right now.
So let's say we expect George Kittle to be out in this game. We know the Cardinals being traditionally the easiest matchup for tight ends this year and dating back to previous years. How willing are you to play Ross Dwelly in this game? Very cheap on the DFS, by the way.
Yeah, I think he'd be a fun. He had 7 targets last week against Seattle, caught 3 for 24. I think he'd be a fun DFS player this week. It would be really fun. 7 targets. You remember also Sanders. I assume Emmanuel Sanders is was he doubtful right now? I forget.
He's listed as questionable.
That's not too bad.
I feel like he's probably on the doubtful side of questionable. He did take part in the walkthroughs the last couple of days, and Matt Maiocco of NBC Bay Area kind of thinks that he might try and get on the field. I don't know what my expectations would be for him going in. It's a painful area, the ribs, for a wide receiver.
And how about the Kendrick Bourne? I mean, who is this guy? Touchdown, 8 targets, 4 catches. Maybe he's a guy to look at, assuming Sanders is limited or doesn't play also.
Yeah, I think, when you look at Dante Pettis, and he turned up as questionable, but I think the bigger issue for him, I mean, Kyle Shanahan was on him this week, calling him out for dropped passes,
Yeah.
not making the most of his opportunities. And this is not a new thing. This was something that goes back to the summer. So seems like he's falling out of favor. And, this was a guy that Shanahan really wanted to have on the roster. They moved up to get him. So interesting situation.
And
for
not
him
to
as
be
well.
not to be forgotten is Debo Samuels, 11 targets, 8 catches, 112 yards. Yeah, I know his salary's probably higher. I don't have the salaries memorized, but there's
not bad.
Yeah, that's pretty good. He's assuming as we see now. Is that an early game? Well, that's a 4:00 game, isn't it, Eastern time? So you'll have to make some choices before you know whether Emmanuel Sanders is out and or Kittle. But there's some opportunities there for good plays.
I do think, for me, Samuel is on my DFS 3 and out this week. Again, a couple reasons. The pricing is fantastic for him in my estimation. 5,600 on FanDuel, but only 4,000 on DraftKings. And as you said, those opportunities last week, I would expect him to have similar opportunities. I know I hear some people out there saying, "What about Patrick Peterson?" I say, bring him on. He hasn't been very good. He has not been the same Patrick Peterson we know from the past, just like Xavier Rhodes in Minnesota has not been the same guy. But in addition, this week, Peterson has a calf injury. I think he's questionable. But either way, he's not 100%. So we got that going for us, too, if we're Debo, on Debo.
Yeah, sounds like some opportunities there in that game for the San Francisco 49ers.
So I think our question machine is broke. I think there might be something with Paris.
Something happened. I guess the world didn't want us to have questions on this Friday night.
All right, well, let's look at a couple of the games that are of great interest to me. Lamar Jackson versus Deshaun Watson. It's the Ravens against the Houston Texans. I believe I read this, but I think Lamar Jackson $600 more on the daily sites or on DraftKings at least than Watson. Which one would you rather play this week?
$600. I mean, I'd really love to play Lamar. He's so hot right now. I would be really tempted to play him.
Yeah, I'd go there. I would go to my DFS 3 and out and find some of those free squares that we're talking about. The Brian Hills, the Russell, Debo Samuels, the guys that may give you room for that 600. Look, I'm not buying the additional because I think the touchdowns maybe even go to Watson, if I'm not mistaken off the top of my head. But the matchup this week, look, I'd rather go against the Houston's defense by far without J.J. Watt than Baltimore's defense right now, which is playing, lights out. I mean, now that their secondary is all intact, and they've been tough against the run all year long. And for that reason, I'm not big on Carlos Hyde this week. But I think this is a great week for Lamar. Every week's a great week for Lamar Jackson.
So, and another thing to remember, it's a minor point, but the Ravens are at home, and they're just so much better at home. I don't know why it is. Maybe it's just standard stuff, but yeah, that should be. Let's hope that's a big scoring game in general. And I mean, Lamar has just been too much fun to watch. I just can't believe how it's just so enjoyable to watch that guy. It's that one whoop-de-doo thing where he did the 360 rotation on that run. And not only that, he outran the other guys after he did that to get to the end zone. It was like he was just playing with them. It was just stunning.
He's very fast. That's very helpful to him. Let's look at another game that I think is kind of interesting here. We've got the New Orleans Saints who laid an egg against the previously very generous Falcons defense. Falcons came off the bye and put a hurting on them. Drew Brees very upset. They gave up 6 sacks, allowed Brees to be sacked 6 times, and never really got a touchdown in this game. They haven't been great throwing the deep ball all year. Is this the Tampa Bay defense has not seen a deep pass they didn't want? So what gives here, Emil?
Oh, I'd hate to be the Buccaneers, even though they're at home this week, because I think the Saints. I mean, if they don't really step it up and just take it to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'd be stunned, even though they're on the road. So I think those are good opportunities for people to play those players on the Saints. I think they're going to I think they're going to take it to him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Michael Thomas, of course, with this secondary is obviously going to be a great play. Alvin Kamara, Michael Thomas, by the way, on pace to break Marvin Harrison's single season catch record, right? I mean,
it's crazy.
This is a guy that's on a super huge roll.
Even
any number.
That bad game they had last week and they got torched. Michael Thomas, 14 targets, 13 catches, 152 yards, and he scored 28 points without scoring a touchdown. Kamara is a little bit light, but he did have 10 targets, 8 catches for 50, so that's 13 PPR.
His day from a fantasy perspective.
Yes, because he only got 4 carries for 23, so that was the bad side. But that's the beauty of a guy like Kamara. He still scored 15 fantasy points on a bad day.
Right. Back to Thomas. He's on pace for 153 catches over 16 games now that I'm looking at it. Current record 143, set by Marvin Harrison. He had the number 5 season in NFL history last year when he got 125 passes. This year he's averaging almost 2 more catches a game than that. This is basically a situation. I mean, my phone hears me talking. And wants to talk back. But yeah, he's totally on a roll. I think, Kamara only 4 carries last week, but that's the thing about him. Even in a tough game, his receiving work in PPR leagues will save the day and help you out a little bit. And we need that.
Traquan Smith caught a ball. Traquan Smith caught a ball. We can cut him now on all of our rosters. Pardon?
He's back and he lives.
Yes. Good stuff.
All right, let's look at another game here. Let's say Jacksonville against Indianapolis. We talked a little bit about that one. So let's get into what about Minnesota, Denver? Broncos playing with Brandon Allen, a quarterback still, of course. And there's one more game I really want to get into, assuming we'll have the time. But no Adam Thielen again in the passing attack. They're not throwing the ball a heck of a lot. That's the teeth of the Denver defense in passing. Is this another huge game for Dalvin Cook, who seems to be hard-pressed not to have great games?
Yeah, I still think Denver's going to be tough, but I certainly think he's a great start right now, Calvin Cook. He's had some huge games. I mean, 7 catches, 86 yards last time, 97 yards rushing, a touchdown. I can't add that up that well, PPR, but that's a whole bunch of points. He's just a start. I don't know about DFS, and that's more of a question because of salary. But, yeah, I think he's going to have a big game.
He's worth paying up for in most cases. I think it's interesting, Madison. I think Mike Taglieri from Fantasy Pros had a great number on this. Even though Madison has, Madison has more rushing yards, the backup to Dalvin Cook, more rushing yards this season than James Conner, Devonta Freeman, Austin Eckler, and Royce Freeman so far.
That is a heck of a stat.
How heavy the Vikings are, right?
Yeah. They're starting to like him more and more. He had 8 carries last week against the Cowboys for 52 yards. Nothing wrong with that. 1 catch for 2 yards, but that's an interesting stat. But that doesn't do anything to Calvin Cook. Dalvin Cook. He's just taking a break for a few times. He's incredible. Yeah, I'm so happy for that guy. He's so healthy. After last year, you watch this guy, and he's just completely come around.
Yeah, I think for the other side of the ball, we should probably see increasingly heavy doses of Philip Lindsay. He seems to be their biggest playmaking threat, and hopefully they continue to try to get him the ball. But let's look at what the matchup of the week, of some interest to me. The Raiders going against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have stopped nobody. That's one of the reasons they're winless. So we've got Josh Jacobs is doing a great job, the rookie running back, on pace to be rookie of the year, giving him a heavy workload. You also like Derek Carr in this game, Tyrell Williams, Darren Waller. Am I getting too far in front of this one? Am I going too overboard to trying to get in on this matchup?
I don't think so. I mean, they're just it's just a great matchup, and is Bengals going to have one of those great games like Atlanta did last week? I don't think so.
No.
They got a new quarterback in there. I think their attitude right now is let's see what we can see in this quarterback. And, he made some good plays, but then he threw an interception for a touchdown. He's a young kid. He looked good in preseason, but I think you're right. Just load up the Oakland players. It's going to be the opportunity. Opportunities always don't work perfectly, but it's a hell of an opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. And so let's wrap it up here. I think we are having some technical issues. Sorry if you're trying to ask questions and we can't see them. I think that's entirely possible in this. But let's talk a little bit about the Jaguars offense. Do we have any expectations that Nick Foles will not hit the ground running? Teammates seem to be impressed. I'll remind everyone, that's worried about DJ Chark or maybe D.D. Westbrook. You go back to the preseason game. I think it was week 3. D.D. Westbrook had a huge game with Foles. The play that Foles was hurt was a long bomb, a touchdown pass to D.J. Chark. This offense is still going to run through Leonard Fournette. What are your expectations, Emil?
I think I think he's going to be a little rusty. I don't know how far that's going to hurt him this first week. I don't if you remember when he came back a couple of years ago and then won the Super Bowl. It took him a while to really get adjusted. Of course, he really hadn't played for a while. But I think the time off and the injury, it's not going to be perfect. So I think we should be more careful about expecting too much, but I think it's going to be a positive. But I'd be a little bit careful about getting too crazy starting him.
Yeah, I will remind everyone that he is one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in November and later in NFL. He's put up great numbers over the course of time. But again, I'm not looking to force him back into lineups this week. There's teams on byes. Matthew Stafford's hurt. There are things going on that may force your hand a little bit in this one. But if you don't have to, I'm probably not playing him either. So we're going to wrap this one up and hopefully come back next week and figure out the whole question thing. I'm thinking Periscope might be having issues because I can't quite find us or can't quite get it up.
Yeah,
either,
it's on. We're on Periscope. It's alive, but there's nothing happening. So obviously there's some technical issues for whatever reason.
All right. Well, if you are watching this, I'm Bob. He's Emil. We're at footballdiehards.com. Come to the website, footballdiehards.com. Use the / or the footballdiehards.com/free trial. We've got all kinds of content, constant stream of news updates going up throughout the week, right up through each set of Sunday's kickoffs, including all the latest inactives as they come in real time. We have great columns, a lot of DFS content from myself, Kyle Dvorak, DraftKings Millionaire Maker, former winner Bobby Gomes. We've got Justin Lanero on the season-long stuff we have. And John Law, by the way, it's easy to forget him. The DraftKings, the Scholars Sheet of DraftKings Knowledge on Saturday is a great read. Some great lineups in there from him. Brad Cruz, one of the world's top high-stakes player, has his season-long picks. Mike Valverde Stock Watch. Gary Davenport with the IDPs, shadow coverage piece. Tons of content throughout the podcast, live video every Wednesday night at 6:15 Eastern Time. Is it 8:15 Eastern Time?
Yes.
Translate too many time zones. And every Sunday morning they do, Kyle and Bobby jump on again at 9 a.m. Eastern Time and do an hour and get you kind of ready to do some fine-tuning on the lineups. You can listen to the Football Diehards on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio every weeknight at 6 Eastern Time. Am I translating the times wrong again? No, that's correct. 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And Saturday nights, Mike Dempsey and I are on Football Diehards on SiriusXM NFL Radio, Channel 88 on your dial. Sunday morning, I'm on the pregame show with Jeff Mann, SiriusXM Fantasy pregame on the Fantasy Channel. And again, hit the website, listen, look, learn. We're here for you. FootballDiehards.com/free trial. Thanks, and we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah.